So, what if I told you that there's a hidden law that shapes, well, pretty much everything, from the global economy all the way down to your own happiness? Today, we're going to decode the 80/20 rule. It's one of the most powerful ways to make sense of our world. It all boils down to this one question. Now, seriously, think about it for a second. You probably wear about 20% of the clothes in your closet, like 80% of the time, right? And when you look at your phone, you probably make 80% of your calls to just 20% of the people in your contacts. In your inbox, come on, you know that 80% of the emails that actually matter come from just a tiny fraction of the people who email you. This isn't just a coincidence, it's a fundamental pattern of how things work. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to look at where this idea came from, see how it shows up all around you, get into the art of strategic focus, and then, finally, see how you can use it as a philosophy for life. So let's dig in. Where did this powerful idea even come from? Well, you might be surprised to hear it didn't start in a boardroom or some fancy university lab. Nope, it all began in a garden. Okay, so picture this. It's 1896, and an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto notices this really striking imbalance. He sees that just 20% of the people in Italy own 80% of the land. He even saw the same pattern in his own garden, where 20% of his pea pods were producing 80% of the peas. But the idea didn't really take off until decades later, in the 1940s, when a management consultant named Joseph Juran picked it up and turned it into a universal principle for quality control. And Juran is the guy who gave us the perfect name for it, the vital few and the trivial many. What he realized was that in literally any system, there are a small number of things that are vitally important, and then there's everything else, which is pretty much trivial. And that one insight, it changes everything. This is really the heart of it all. It doesn't matter if we're talking about inputs and outputs, causes and effects, or effort and reward. The relationship is almost always lopsided. A tiny slice of the causes creates this huge chunk of the results. So, where else does this thing pop up? I'm telling you, once you start looking for it, you see this unequal law is a fundamental feature of business, nature, and yeah, your own life. And it is shockingly consistent. In business, it's a classic. 20% of your customers will usually bring in 80% of the money. If you're a programmer, you know that 20% of the code is responsible for 80% of the bugs. And for your health, a few key habits, sleep, what you eat, moving around, they account for almost all of your well-being. But wait, it gets even more extreme. Linguists have figured out that if you learn just the most common 800 to 1,000 words of a language, you can understand about 80% of a normal conversation. And get this, on YouTube, the pattern is even wilder. A tiny 3% of videos get over 90% of all the views. And when you think about your social life, most of your real, genuine emotional support probably comes from a very, very small circle of friends and family. Okay, so this brings up a huge question. If this principle is so powerful and it's everywhere, why are we so bad at using it? Why do we spend so much of our time and energy on the trivial many? Well, we all tend to fall into something called the activity trap. We make the classic mistake of thinking that being busy is the same as being productive. You know that feeling. Answering a bunch of emails, going to meetings, checking little things off a to-do list. It feels like you're getting stuff done. But a lot of the time, you're just messing around with the trivial many. Real progress, actual strategic impact, comes from focusing on that vital few. What's wild is that, in a way, our brains are already wired for this. The work of Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman basically shows our brain is an 80/20 machine. It's constantly taking mental shortcuts, using about 20% of the available information to make about 80% of its quick gut decisions. The trick is to learn how to apply that same ruthless efficiency on purpose. to the decisions that really matter. The legendary management guru Peter Drucker absolutely nailed it with this one. We can get super, super good at doing things that just don't need to be done at all. The real challenge isn't just about doing things right. It's about finding the right things to do in the first place. And that brings us to the most important section, how to actually use this rule. Because this isn't just some productivity hack. It's a whole philosophy for getting more done by doing less, but doing what you do way, way better. If you want to make this a part of your life, it really comes down to 4 simple but incredibly powerful steps. First, you have to identify that critical 20% in whatever you're doing. Second, you prioritize that vital few over everything else. Third, you have to be ruthless. Eliminate, automate, or delegate the trivial many. And finally, you pour all your best energy and resources right where they'll have the biggest impact. You know who was an absolute master of this? Steve Jobs. When he came back to Apple in 1997, he famously cut their product line from over 350 products down to just 10. He understood that real focus isn't about what you decide to do, it's about all the hundreds of other good ideas you decide not to do. It's just like Stephen Covey always taught us. True effectiveness isn't about managing your time so you can cram more stuff in. No, it's about figuring out your most important priorities, your vital few, and then building your schedule around them to make sure they always get done. So, if you only remember one thing from all of this, let it be this. Efficiency is about doing things right, but effectiveness, that's about doing the right things. And the 80-20 rule is your ultimate guide to being effective. Being able to answer this question is a genuine superpower. The people who figure this out, they stop trying to do everything. Instead, they focus like a laser on the key activities, the key relationships, the key habits that bring them the vast majority of their results and their happiness. In the end, the Pareto Principle is really about finding your point of leverage. It's about finding that one spot Archimedes talked about where a little effort can move the world. And in your work, your health, and your life, that point of leverage is always smaller than you think, but it's always way more powerful.